It is a great pleasure to welcome Ms. Manneet Nanda to Coffee with Apna, APNA, Asia Pacific Network for Accessibility. A very warm welcome to you, Ms. Manmeet Nanda, to Coffee with APNA. And it's a
Thank
great
you.
pleasure. It's a great pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and July is the Disability Pride Month, and people all over the world are celebrating it. So let's begin with Disability Pride itself. So, in your perspective, what is disability pride from the policy point of view or from the governance point of view? Because we have seen a shift from charity model to rights based and like equal participation, dignity. So, there has
Mm.
been a paradigm shift. How is this shift influencing the ways government think about inclusion?
Let me begin by saying that when I look at the disability policy today, I simply just ask this question is what can we as the government do for persons with disabilities, whether they are persons with disabilities in the pride segment or otherwise? What barriers have we created intentionally or unintentionally that have prevented persons from disability from doing things that they want to do, whether to go for a walk, to go for a job, to get a skill set, to enjoy a movie, to go for a rock concert. I think that difference is what the RPWD Act of 2016 very beautifully laid down in black and white. That disability rights movement is no longer a movement of sympathy. It is about rights, it is about their entitlement, and it is about we as the government, we as citizens of this country, as private entrepreneurs, what do we do to ensure that they get those rights?
Very true. And dignity matters the most for everyone,
Absolutely.
every
Yes.
human. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I mean, we all don't like VIP treatment, do we? We
No.
don't like people getting VIP treatment. Yeah.
Yeah, true.
So when the front door is open, why go from the back door?
Very true. Very true. Mhm. So changing policies, it is very important to change the policy, but changing public attitudes, it is a greater challenge. Because culture, like whenever the culture is shaped, it is shaped by the stories, by the conversations, shared experiences. So what do you think the role of storytelling is, or even humor or satire, in changing the way how the society thinks about disability and inclusion?
I think that's a very interesting question. We, as the government and as today's society, we've actually forgotten how to humor ourselves and to laugh at ourselves. And we have forgotten how to use humor as a particularly effective means of communication. Because when we use humor and satire, then pity and laughter cannot occupy the same energy in the room, right? The
True.
moment the audience laughs with a person with disability, the pedestal of that pity collapses. Then it is just ordinary people together in a room of and common audience enjoying a particular talk. So I think storytelling and with humor and satire will be very impactful. And in today's India, which is a youthful India, I'm sure the youth of the country enjoy humor and satire. And I think it'll be a very powerful means of storytelling them and asking them as to what do they want out of a policy and how do they want to look at the disability rights movement. So very, very important. And I think it will help to greatly change what I feel is the biggest impediment in this entire story of disability policy and disability rights, and that is the inflexible or the inaccessible mindset.
Mm,
So inaccessibility is actually not so much around us than it is within us.
yeah.
The inaccessibility is in our minds, and that needs to change. And I think that's the most inexpensive means of inaccessibility to shift. So mindset, of course, it's most difficult to change because we are so stuck in our ways, but it's the most inexpensive. And I think humor, storytelling, um, the information communication tools, films, media, they play a very, very important role.
Yeah, yeah. So our conversations are evolving from sympathy to pride and equal participation. So mainstream media, as you have just said, and the popular culture across our region, how do you see? How do you see about how they can portray persons with disabilities in the region or in India? How can popular media help us in doing that?
I think they can play a very, very important role because media, social media, the news, films, radio, I think they are a part of our lives in some way or the other. Each one prefers a medium of communication to be involved with, whether we read our newspapers, the articles, or we watch television or films or the social media. We all know its impact. We all know how beautifully they can manage to create an impact in a very short span of attention. And I think that is what we need to capture as a disability movement. Capture attention strongly, um, sharply, and impactfully. And I think social media has its great outreach in the youth of the country today. And even the older generation, I think I see my mom using the social media far more than me myself. So I think we all need to use technology, use the new means of communication, and leapfrog into it. So I think it's technology is the most inclusive medium of communication. We
Mm,
should use it that powerfully and that positively.
very true. Because in movies and all, we have always seen a person with disability being portrayed as like a poor person, a poor guy, or who needs sympathy, or like a superhero. So we need to be in between that.
Yes, yes,
Yeah, portray them like in real life situations. They're working, they are studying, their education
yes,
in
yes.
every walk of life.
Actually, the moment we'll stop, when disability or people with disability stop standing out and they just merge with the crowds because they're
Mm,
just so regularly a part of our working life, the schools, the teachers, all who can be people with disabilities, our employers, our subordinates at work, when they stop standing out because they are a person with disability, but they start being a part of the crowd because they are included. And I think
yeah,
the more powerful word is belonging. They
yeah.
are belonging there because included means just opening the door. But belonging to a place is actually staying there and being a part of that same energy. The moment we reach that point of life in our society, I think we have arrived and we will arrive.
And for that, they should be visible more.
Yes.
And there comes the role of accessibility, the infrastructure, and everything. So many countries have developed strong laws and accessibility standards. Yet genuine inclusion goes beyond legal compliance many times. And from your experience, what distinguishes organizations and governments that truly embed accessibility into their culture from those who simply comply with the regulations?
Uh, I think, like I said, the inaccessibility should stop being seen as an beyond completion requirement. Actually it
Yeah.
should be from design, from birth, like you and I have often talked about and are known while we are working on something known as non-negotiable standards.
Yeah.
Inclusion does not live only in Delhi, Mumbai and Bangalore. Inclusion, if it works only in airports and malls, then we are not succeeding. Inclusion should be when a rural person with disability, a woman, can independently visit her bank,
Yeah.
access a government scheme digitally, send her child to school without any problems. I think that's where true accessibility will be. And I think the non-negotiables in that would be that, like I said, we start and design um, with being completely accessible.
Mhm.
We make sure that all government schemes and all government buildings, right from the panchayat level,
Yeah.
whether it's the panchayat house, the panchayat office, the ICDS center, the Anganwadis, the primary school, the primary health center, they in their design should be accessible. So when that accessibility becomes a way of life, when it becomes so natural that we don't need to think about retrofitting it, I think
Yeah.
when we have real time captioning, we have actual language captioning, and we have sign language translation, we have easy documentation reading, or apps that should be available in all language, should be simple, should be easy to be accessed. I think that is the accessible India that we should all be building and moving towards.
Yeah. And even when we retrofit, I think that is not even cost effective.
No, no, absolutely. It's probably more expensive, I
More
think.
expensive.
When
Yeah.
we think of accessibility and inclusion at the design stage, it's actually cost effective. It can be made within the same DPR amount, like if I talk in government terms, and
Mhm.
it is all those requirements that are actually used by many more population and people than who are actually persons with disabilities. We keep forgetting that
Yeah.
all our accessibility features are probably used by all of us. And I, like I say it and I say it again, that we are only abled or not disabled temporarily. Each one of us will be a person with disability sooner or later, and we must accept that truth.
True, true. And as you have said that technology is very important and accessibility is increasingly becoming digital now. We do
Yes.
many things digitally, and it is like a blessing for us. Even if I say for myself, it is a blessing for me. I'm a person with locomotor disability, and uh, when things have become digital, I feel more confident, more independent. So across the Asia Pacific region, societies are also, other countries are also rapidly embracing this, the digital services from education to healthcare, banking, public administration, everywhere. So how do we encourage governments and technology developers to adopt accessibility by design?
You all have heard about this, nothing about us without us. But that should be nothing about us, without us designing it for us. So,
Yeah.
persons with disabilities should be increasingly used by technology developers to understand what is true accessibility. Whether it is for a tech hardware or a software for a service that they are going to build, अगर नहीं involve किया गया, then we are not really truly doing a good, innovative, inclusive design. And a good design is actually invisible. Greater the invisibility, the greater the accessibility of that design, because everybody can use it. You don't need to do extra things just to make other people be combined to it. I mean, that's what I feel. It's like I often explain it to my children. It's like a universal design, whether it's in a tech platform or a product. It's like good manners. You don't notice it when it's there,
Yeah.
but you certainly notice it when somebody is rude and not well behaved. The algorithm should involve and should be tested by as many persons with disabilities, if not more. And
Mm.
that would make it a truly accessible technology.
And even for the corporates who are developing this, and it makes a good business sense for them.
Yes, it is true investment. It is
Yeah.
actually investment in human capital, because if I have designed, and if I am a person with disability and I've designed inclusive technology, I have made sure that it is used by more number of people. I've increased my access to more number of people, which includes persons with disabilities, and I've included them as our potential customer base.
Yeah. So coming to women and girls with disabilities, because there are doubly or many times marginalized part of the society, and they often face multiple discrimination, intersectionalities in various ways. So, from the policy point of view, what approaches have the greatest potential to strengthen their leadership, their independence, and personal safety?
Oh, that's a tough question because I think what women face generally, and women with disabilities, what they face is not just one single glass ceiling; it is multiple. And I call it. I mean, I would like to say that they face many, several invisible walls. It is gender, it is disability, it is social stereotyping, it is poverty, and it's multiplicative actually in many ways.
Yeah.
Sad part is that we today our data systems also mostly um, uh, when they report on the disabilities, they also do not talk about the gender disability figures there also, most of the data sets that I have at least read.
Yeah.
So the answer, I think, is not another welfare program. The answer is in inclusive education, inclusive skilling, entrepreneurship development, financial inclusion for any woman, person with disability, and a woman to be financially important. Of course, safety, leadership models, representation, all of that has to work together, be integrated together. But I think it starts from our homes, it starts from our families, it starts from our upbringings. When we are asking for a seat at a table, it is possible that that seat is still not properly designed for a woman,
Mhm.
and more so for a woman with disabilities. We should actually ask that why was that table even designed?
Yeah.
Inclusivity works right from the ground. There is a lot of work, and I think that is where I feel the intersectionality between different government departments and ministries need to break down. We need to stop working in silos. We need to talk to each other. We need to make sure our policies are talking with each other and are so seamlessly integrated that whether it's Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, whether it's women and child, whether it's disabilities, we are all integrated
Yeah.
at the gender level.
And even their health, because
Yes,
their health, their reproductive, sexual and reproductive health gets like neglected many times.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So no single institution can build inclusive society alone. You know that, like we
Yes,
need to work together, whether it is grassroots organization, disabled people's organization, government agencies, everyone. So,
yes.
in your view, how can stronger partnerships between governments and civil societies help to transform grassroots innovations into lasting systemic change? Because we need a systemic change.
So very well said, Dr. Abha, that the honest answer is that government has the scale and the mandate.
Yeah.
But the ground truth is that there is a DPI that government has built, and that is being used by different government departments, ministries, and to build their policies, etc. But nobody can substitute each other. We need to build and be together in a structured participation. That intersectionality and breaking of silos is extremely important. I have seen this. I'm trying at the department level. We are trying at the department level to push a pilot project called the Coalition of the Willing. It is like we are trying to approach a particular disability sector. We've taken hearing impaired and hard of hearing, and we want to target it with the cohort of the government and the civil society and partner organizations who are either providing services in terms of education or health or reproductive health or skilling. We brought them all together, and we're trying to approach the disability in an entire life cycle approach, from the birth to the from the birth to the cradle to the childhood, early childhood, to education, accessible materials, providing them proper skilling, what they can fit into, and then ensuring that the corporates that employ them, the private sector that employment retains them. And that is what we call as from the cradle to the grave concept. And I think that kind of structural participation is extremely important. Of course, funding is very important in all
Yeah.
of this. It will require a lot of funds to come together. But honestly, I think when we have key performance indicators and when we work together structurally and bring us all together, and it's not just the government departments, it's the state governments, it's
Mhm.
the civil society, it is the innovators, the technology providers. When this all is brought out together, and I hope that one can portray that pilot to be scalable to other disability areas, I
Yeah.
think we would be able to answer that question of how does the civil society and the governance come together to target and answer such problematic statements.
Yeah. Yeah. So, ma'am, you know APNA, Asia Pacific Network for Accessibility. It is a women led regional network committed to advancing accessibility in the
Yeah,
region and inclusion, of course.
yeah.
So, according to you, what unique role can such networks play to accelerate accessibility and inclusive development across the region?
I think one there are many important roles that you can play. That one that comes to my mind immediately is that since you have access to accessibility advocacy groups such
Yeah.
across such a large geographical area, there is a lot of learnings that you can bring to the policy makers in each of the government departments. There are a lot of pilot studies that can be implemented based on their good practices. So that will be a lot of strong learning issues. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We
Yeah.
could learn from their failures or their errors in judgment and improve our policies and our program implementations in a very big way. Many of our partner countries, or your partner countries actually, would have probably done well in terms of decreasing the disparity in gender inequalities or providing better skilling, gamification or skilling programs that can be then brought into our country. There is the RPWD Act 2016 is a very beautifully written legislation that can again be also shown to those countries and told them about how this can be pushed together. But I
Yeah.
think um, how we are approaching the accessibility non-negotiable, the fact that we have involved so many non-governmental partners as the facilitators of those groups, involving stakeholders in such a large community and a population, ensuring that there's representation of different PWD PWDs across the different subgroups that we have formed under the Rajiv Ratori case,
Mhm.
only tells how this example of involving the civil society and the stakeholders along with the government departments to in order to formulate a governmental policy could also be another way in which we can use your apna medium to learn and grow together, I think.
Yeah, very wonderfully put together, ma'am. So, when you imagine the Asia Pacific region 10 years from now, what gives you the greatest hope for the future of disability inclusion? And what is the one change you would like to see, like it becomes a reality?
I think what I would like to see is that accessibility should never be seen as version 2.0.
Yeah.
It should be it should be part of the design brief, and I hope that apna and the department for persons with empowerment for persons with disabilities and the ministry under the Ministry of Social Justice, we all together along with our civil society stakeholders realize and bring that fact into every policy of the government. Accessibility is just fundamental. As long as we start to understand that, I think we can um, move faster and forward Government can always create policy, and civil society helps to create that trust in that policy. And when persons of disability create those solutions, they are always the best ideas that will increasingly focus on accessibility and inclusion. And when these all people move together, that is when progress happens. That's when a government alone can't do what is set out to be an accessible India completely. The civil society cannot alone do it. Persons with disability individually or with smaller groups can't do it. It's only when we all move together. And government doesn't pretend to know everything, but the civil society also should not assume that the government can never listen. The government listens, and that's when organizations and conversations like this helps to bring more and more people thinking on the same lines together, and progress happens somewhere in the middle then.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it'll happen. It is
Yeah.
moving slowly
Yeah.
towards that direction.
It would happen. So, ma'am, we would like to conclude with a certain set of rapid fire questions because our audiences, they love it.
Okay.
So, so just the first thought that comes into your mind, you can reply. Disability pride in one or two words.
Work in progress.
And accessibility today, is it compliance, culture, or work in progress?
It's increasing momentum in the belief that it is required to be there in design.
And one misconception about disability that you would wish it would disappear tomorrow. One misconception.
That disability equals inability.
And one innovation, whether it is technological or social, that excites you the most for future of accessibility.
I think assistive technology is one leap of energy that the disability uh, s- m- movement really required, and it works to its benefit greatly. I would love to see real time closed captioning in
Mm.
the language that the speaker is using um, with sign language interpretation happening simultaneously. So if we could have a technology that manages to look into at least 4 or 5 requirements of persons with disability, it'll be like a game changer, I think.
Tea or coffee or something else during long policy discussions.
Oh, coffee for me, black coffee, fuel, absolutely.
Okay. And one leadership quality every young public servant should cultivate.
Compassion, absolutely. There is nothing without passion and compassion. Hmm.
And one message for young persons with disabilities across Asia Pacific who aspire to become future leaders.
I think I don't think inclusion depends on extraordinary people coming up with extraordinary solutions. I think it would be, in my opinion, ordinary solutions working completely and cohesively and inclusively well. That's what comes to my mind.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am, for your time. It was pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Dr. Ava. It was pleasure likewise.
Today's conversation reminds us that disability pride is not simply about celebrating achievement. It is about affirming dignity, recognizing potential, and creating societies where every person can participate fully and equally.